Mom said Santa forgot us again. The boy told the lonely billionaire at the bus stop on Xmas night. Snow fell like quiet confessions the city never meant to keep, and on Christmas night the streets of a small American town glowed with borrowed warmth from shop windows and streetlights that hummed against the cold. At a lonely bus stop under a flickering shelter, a boy in a threadbare red sweater lifted his hand and pointed at a world that felt too big for him, and the weight of what he believed settled on a man who had everything except the one thing money could never buy. In that instant, fate leaned closer, and Christmas chose a different way to arrive. Before the story unfolds any further, pause for a moment. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet miracles that happen when strangers choose compassion, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel so more stories like this can reach hearts that need them. Ethan Caldwell had not planned to be at that bus stop. The billionaire founder of a logistics empire had planned nothing after the board meeting that ended early, after the driver called to say the car wouldn't start, after the penthouse felt too silent and the city below too loud. He wore a tailored suit that belonged in a different temperature, cradled a paper cup of coffee that steamed against the winter air, and stared at the route map as if it could tell him where to go next. The town around him carried Christmas like a song everyone knew except him. Windows displayed ornaments and soft lights, bells rang somewhere distant, and a decorated tree shimmered down the street, where couples passed arm in arm, breath rising in white clouds. Ethan felt separate from it all, as if the glass walls of his life had followed him outside. The boy arrived with the night, small boots crunching through slush, curls escaping a knitted cap that had seen better winters. He was accompanied by his mother at a distance, her posture tired but vigilant, the kind of watchfulness that came from knowing the world rarely bent kindly for people like them. The boy's eyes were wide and earnest, fixed on the shelter, the bench, the man whose watch cost more than their rent. He carried belief the way some children carried toys, loosely but fiercely, and when he lifted his arm, it was not accusation but observation, a simple gesture toward the season itself. What settled into Ethan's chest then was not guilt, but recognition, an understanding that wealth had insulated him from the quiet disappointments others wore daily. Ethan's past hovered close that night. He had grown up in Ohio, raised by a single mother who worked double shifts at a diner and hid her exhaustion behind smiles. Christmas had been fragile in that house, stitched together with thrifted ornaments and promises that sometimes fell short. He remembered believing once, too, that good things arrived if you were patient, that someone out there noticed. Success had changed his address and his vocabulary, but not the empty space left behind when his mother passed before he could tell her he'd finally made it. The calendar said Christmas Eve, but grief did not keep holidays. The bus stop became a small island where lives brushed together without ceremony. The boy's mother kept her distance, respecting boundaries she had learned the hard way, while the boy leaned into curiosity, his presence warming the cold. Ethan felt the impulse to retreat, to look away, to protect the careful shell he'd built around his emotions. Yet the boy's certainty pierced it. Not anger, not bitterness, just a belief stated plainly. The season had promised something and failed to deliver, and the child was trying to understand the math of disappointment. The wind cut sharper, carrying the smell of pine from a nearby lot, where leftover trees leaned like forgotten guests. A bus hissed past without stopping. Ethan watched the boy's breath bloom and fade, and he felt something loosen. He thought of the warehouse, employees who would clock in tomorrow, of the drivers who would deliver packages to homes filled with laughter, of the systems he'd optimized until the human faces blurred. For the first time in a long while, he wondered what his success had been for if it could not bend toward this moment. What followed was not a speech or a vow, but a decision that rippled outward. Ethan stood, offering his bench without ceremony, his movements deliberate and calm. He reached for his phone, not to check markets, but to remember how to ask for help. He called his assistant, and then the head of his foundation, the words practical, the intention radical. He requested nothing extravagant, only immediate kindness, warm coats, groceries, a small tree, toys chosen with care, and a place to sleep that did not smell like fear. He knew logistics. He knew how to make things move quickly when they mattered. Time slowed, then shifted. Snow thickened, the streetlights halos of gold. The boy watched with fascination as adults moved with purpose. Ethan felt exposed and alive, aware that generosity was not about erasing hardship but standing beside it. When a delivery van pulled up, unmarked but full, the bus stop transformed into a staging ground for mercy. Volunteers appeared, some summoned, some simply drawn by the sight of need meeting action. The mother stepped closer now, eyes wary but hopeful, pride wrestling with relief. Ethan learned their names from forms and soft explanations. The boy was named Noah, a name that carried stories of floods and arks and survival. His mother, Grace, wore resilience like armor. They lived week to week, navigating shelters and shifts, keeping faith with a God who felt distant but not gone. Ethan recognized that faith, it mirrored his own longing, dulled by success but not extinguished. As supplies were organized and hands warmed around cups of soup, the night took on a cinematic. Stillness. The town seemed to pause, as if aware that something important was happening under that humble shelter. Ethan watched Noah examine each item with careful wonder, not greed but gratitude, and he felt the ache of a life that had narrowed too much. He remembered the first time his company turned a profit, how hollow the celebration had felt without someone to share it with. Here, sharing felt like abundance. The challenges did not disappear with a van full of kindness. Grace still faced an uncertain future, paperwork, and long hours. Noah would still wake up some mornings with questions adults struggled to answer. Ethan understood that a single night could not fix a system that bent against the vulnerable, but it could change trajectories, open doors, and remind people that they were seen. He committed then to something quieter than headlines: sustained support, housing assistance, job placement, counseling, and a community that did not vanish after the lights came down. In the days that followed, the story of the bus stop traveled, not as gossip, but as gratitude. Volunteers spoke of a man who listened. Employees felt their work align with purpose. Ethan visited the shelter again, not as a benefactor, but as a participant, stacking boxes, learning names, discovering that leadership looked different when you knelt to tie a child's shoe. He learned that Noah loved trains and maps, that Grace cooked meals from memory and hope, that resilience had 1,000 small expressions. Christmas morning arrived with a shy sun and streets still hushed. A small apartment loaned by the foundation waited, modest and warm. A tree stood by the window, decorated with paper stars and a few glass ornaments that caught the light just right. Ethan did not linger. He understood that dignity mattered. But as he left, he felt lighter than he had in years, the kind of lightness that comes from choosing connection over comfort. The season moved on, as seasons do. Ethan returned to boardrooms with a different posture. He redirected resources, asked harder questions, listened longer. The company thrived not because profits spiked overnight, but because purpose sharpened focus. Employees volunteered, policies softened, partnerships grew. The bus stop became a quiet legend, a reminder that miracles often wear ordinary coats. Months later, spring softened the town. Noah enrolled in school, his laughter less guarded. Grace found steady work and began to plan beyond the next bill. Ethan attended Noah's school play, sitting in the back, clapping until his hands hurt. He did not need recognition. He needed the proof that change, once chosen, multiplied. If this story has touched your heart so far, please take a moment now to like the video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel so stories of compassion can continue to reach those who need them most. Near the end of that year, Ethan returned to the bus stop alone. The shelter had been repainted, the bench replaced. Snow began again, gentle and forgiving. He sat where he had once waited without knowing why, and he felt gratitude settle like warmth. He thought of his mother, of the boy he had been, of the man he was becoming. He understood then that Christmas had not forgotten anyone. It had simply waited for hands willing to deliver it. Just before we end, we have a special request. Please comment below and share what kindness means to you, or a moment when a stranger changed your life, because your words may be the hope someone else is waiting for. The night deepened, lights flickered on, and the town breathed. Somewhere, a child slept easier. Somewhere, a man learned how to belong. And in the quiet space between snowfall and song, the truest gift found its way home. The story did not end at the bus stop, because lives rarely change in a single night without ripples that keep moving long after the snow melts. What happened on that Christmas Eve became a quiet turning point, not just for Ethan Caldwell, Noah, and Grace, but for an entire circle of people who would never fully understand how close they had all come to missing one another. Winter carried on with its usual indifference, but something inside Ethan had shifted permanently. He began waking earlier, not with the weight of numbers pressing against his chest, but with a sense of responsibility that felt deeply personal. Success no longer tasted hollow, it demanded meaning. He restructured his foundation, focusing less on grand announcements and more on sustained human outcomes. Housing programs expanded, emergency relief was paired with long-term mentorship, and partnerships formed with churches and community centers across the state. It was quieter work, slower work, but it felt honest. For the first time, Ethan wasn't chasing growth, he was cultivating impact. Grace felt the change in smaller, more fragile ways. Stability, once unfamiliar, entered her life like a cautious guest. She learned to sleep through the night without calculating worst-case scenarios. She cooked dinners without rushing, rediscovering recipes passed down from her mother, meals that tasted like home rather than survival. The apartment walls slowly filled with color, Noah's drawings taped crookedly beside a simple wooden cross she had brought from the shelter. Faith, which had once felt like a test she was constantly failing, softened into something gentler. She began volunteering on weekends, helping other mothers navigate the same systems that had nearly broken her. Noah, too, changed in ways that could not be measured by charts or reports. His shoulders relaxed. His questions became curious rather than worried. He talked about the future with the fearless confidence children are supposed to have. School became a place of excitement instead of confusion. His teachers noticed how he shared snacks, how he looked for kids sitting alone. The disappointment he once carried had transformed into empathy, and though no one said it out loud, that was the true miracle of that night. Spring brought warmth and visibility. The story of the bus stop surfaced again when a local paper ran a small feature about the foundation's work, careful not to sensationalize but honest about its origins. Ethan avoided interviews, but people recognized the pattern. Help that arrived without judgment, systems designed around dignity. Donations increased, not because of guilt, but because people wanted to be part of something real. Ethan understood then that generosity was contagious when rooted in sincerity. One afternoon, months later, Ethan found himself standing at a church fundraiser, watching Noah run between folding tables, laughter echoing against brick walls. Grace caught his eye and nodded, a silent acknowledgement filled with gratitude and pride. There was no debt between them, no imbalance, only connection. Ethan felt the presence of his mother in moments like that, as if she were quietly approving from somewhere unseen. He stopped measuring success by distance traveled, and began measuring it by lives steadied. Challenges still appeared, as they always do. There were setbacks, funding gaps, and stories that did not resolve neatly. Ethan learned that compassion did not guarantee gratitude, and that good intentions required resilience. But he also learned that staying mattered more than saving. Showing up again and again was the real commitment. He became comfortable with discomfort, understanding that growth lived there. Another Christmas arrived, quieter but fuller. Snow fell again, familiar and forgiving. This time, Ethan did not find himself alone. He joined a community dinner, sleeves rolled up, serving food beside volunteers who knew his name not because of his wealth, but because of his consistency. Noah helped decorate a small tree in the hall, placing the star on top with ceremonial seriousness. Grace sang softly with the choir, her voice steady, her eyes bright. As the night drew close, Ethan stepped outside briefly, breathing in the cold air. He thought about how one sentence spoken by a child had rearranged his entire life. He understood now that loneliness was not cured by crowds or accomplishments, but by purpose shared with others. Christmas had not changed because of him, he had changed because he finally allowed Christmas to reach him. If this continuation has moved you, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe to the channel so stories of hope continue to find their way to those who need them most. Before the final moments fade, we invite you once more. Leave a comment sharing a time when kindness surprised you, or when a small moment changed everything. Your story might be the light someone else is searching for. That night, as lights dimmed and snow settled gently over the town, the bus stop stood empty but no longer forgotten. It had become a quiet landmark of grace. And somewhere within that stillness, the promise of Christmas lived on. Not in gifts or legends, but in the enduring power of choosing one another. 0.